Hey everybody, it's Michael Bishop again, and this is another segment of I'm Fine. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Usually I have a script in front of me and I'm reading it, and it's something I had written a couple days before and gone over and had thought about a lot, but today, because of the subject matter, I'm kind of going to approach this with a little more candor. We're going to be talking about anxiety today, specifically hemophilia-induced anxiety, or at least my experience with my hemophilia giving me really bad anxiety. I think generally speaking, I'm a pretty anxious person. I'm a bit of a dork, and so social situations or public speaking, anything like that, I think I have an above average level of discomfort. However, that is not necessarily the type of anxiety I'm going to be talking about today. And I'm also not going to be talking about the very understandable and natural anxiety that comes along with having bleeds, because I think that's totally normal and it's okay. And in my experience, it's not particularly debilitating. And I think if you explained hemophilia to anybody, if you explained bleeds to anybody and said, I have some anxiety around these things happening, they would say, yeah, of course you do. But rather the anxiety I want to talk about today is something I experienced in my early to mid 20s, which is some panic attacks that came along with my bleeds, which sounds so weird because they're things that I've experienced my entire life. I thought I had a complete handle on my hemophilia by that age. I was living alone, having a lot of bleeds, but like able to treat them by myself and, cook with one leg or one arm or whatever it was. I thought, okay, I can, it still isn't fun, but I'm like an adult and I can handle this stuff, But then suddenly I noticed myself going into a real panic when I felt a bleed happening, and it wasn't a normal or manageable panic. It was not something I'd ever experienced before. And in the years since, I've tried to deconstruct it a little bit. And I think I was feeling the results of joint damage more than I did when I was younger. Certainly when you're young and have a, super strong body, you get a bleed, you treat it, you bounce back just as high as you were before that bleed started. That's the metaphor I always used with my friends. Like, you're a little ball and someone drops you, you bounce. They don't even have to move their hand to, reach down to grab you. You bounce right back up to where you were. And I think for the first time I was feeling myself not getting that high anymore, not reaching the same, not going back totally to normal, as it were. I could feel the degradation of my body, which is really scary. And bleeds were the reason that was happening. And so when I felt a bleed coming on, it was not just, oh, I have to deal with this bleed. It's playing the tape out. And as my friends and I say, future tripping, and like thinking, okay, I've had X number of bleeds this year and my body is, this much worse. That means in 5 years, I can expect to be this uncomfortable or whatever it is, I was just so consumed with not just this bleed, but what this bleed represented to my overall health and to my overall ability to get through the day, And so there I was at 22 or 23 or however old I was, living on my own and doing my own thing. And it felt like I had regressed in my ability to take care of myself. And selfishly, annoyingly, it was like, okay, I have this bleed, but then I have this other thing I have to deal with because it's making me panic all day. And I might, think something is worse than it is, or shortness of breath, or I can't see anybody or talk to anybody. It was like, it was affecting my life separate from the bleed and making it all the worse, which is why I knew I needed to address it or fix it. And mental health, as we say a lot on shows like this, and I know people on BloodStream have talked about this a lot, but mental health stuff is not as clear cut as hemophilia is, or something like that. It's totally different. It's not oh, this thing is happening and I can see it and I can feel it very directly. I'm going to do my medicine. Bob's your uncle. We're good. It's something, it felt much more abstract, and it felt like something associated with my hemophilia that I was ill prepared for. I didn't know how to handle this thing. And it was a challenge for which I was not particularly ready. And I hope in talking about it, I can connect with you in some way if you are feeling additional anxiety as you age with your hemophilia. I think I and many people like me think, okay, I'm old. I should only be getting better at dealing with this, and any step in a different direction or any evidence to the contrary makes you feel like you're failing in some way or regressing in some way, when instead it's just, there's an additional obstacle here, or, it's harder to fight now. I'm older. I'm tired. Whatever it is, it's not a failing. It's not even, it's just a continuation of your journey, And I wish, like with all mental health issues, I had a clear answer, and like this one thing, I bought this particular crystal and it solved all my problems or whatever. And that's certainly not the case. But I think it forced my hand to address how I was really feeling about my body changing and getting older in general. That is, your body getting worse is not something unique to hemophiliacs. That happens to everyone as they age. We probably just have to deal with it a little sooner, and that's okay. And you might be forced to face what that means to you. And I think that was the scary part. I didn't quite know how to do that. I certainly didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have to deal with the, additional anxieties or additional days off or whatever it meant in my mind. And honestly, I think the best advice I can give is just talking about it, because I think that that's what worked for me. I had this thing going on that felt separate from my hemophilia, but was undeniably connected to it. And when I just brought it up to my friends, not even with the expectation that they could tell me what to do or would even necessarily make me feel better in the moment, I think just bringing it up to them and saying, hey, I'm experiencing this thing, and letting them respond with, wow, dude, that sucks. It doesn't seem profound in the moment, and it might not give you the relief that you're looking for in the moment, but something is happening chemically in your brain when you are venting that stuff and you're shining a light on it that makes it less powerful. It makes it less potent. And I truly believe that is how I got past this time in my life. I just focused on it and really dissected what it meant to me that my body was getting worse, and kind of learning again to love my body despite that, coming to peace with that, and talking about it openly. I think another big piece was therapy, having my friends and family in whom I could confide, but an additional person who is kind of separate from those people, who can be another ear, and I think like explaining to them hemophilia and what was happening and what was causing the anxiety, and hearing them kind of say, yeah, like I'm new here, but that makes total sense to me that you're feeling that way, was a feeling of validation that I don't think I could have gotten anywhere else unless I pulled a stranger off the street and explained it to them. But this was like a trained professional who was able to validate my feelings of anxiety and letting me know that my brain wasn't necessarily misfiring when it was making those connections and making me anxious, And I think that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about anxiety generally. If you're feeling something similar, I hope that we can connect and that you feel seen. And if you haven't felt this way about bleeds or your hemophilia generally, or your bleeding disorder, that's fantastic. Just keep an eye out for that. If your body is changing and you're finding you're in a particularly difficult phase of your life with your bleeding disorder, check in with yourself and express that to your friends, and be mindful of the fact that your body can kind of rebel and say, hey, I'm scared. And you can tell it, that's okay. That's okay. But we gotta keep going, and everything's going to be okay. Thank you guys for listening.